Tepu and Namaste. This is Gasak Keparu with another broadcast here for you. And this one I'm going to talk about a very interesting subject, and I have some show and tell for you. Now, originally I wasn't going to do this video, but it's been bugging me the last couple of days. So it's been on my mind. I've been dreaming about it. And that is the idea that we never landed on the moon. And you know, my perspective on this is that, you know, I follow a lot of Jordan Maxwell's work, and he says that the world is not the way you think it is. And more and more as I study spirituality and look into certain conspiracy theories, I'm beginning to realize that the world is totally opposite of the way we were taught or told. In fact, when I look at the major learning institutions, I think of programming institutions that they want you to conform to a certain perspective that is not necessarily in line with reality. So I started out originally studying to be an actor and a filmmaker. And one of the first films that I saw was A Trip to the Moon, which was back in 1902. And it was a very interesting film as it kind of like had a theory on how we would land on the moon, and when we got there, what would we see. And I love that whole creative approach and kind of visualizing the future. So lo and behold, we do land on the moon, and you know, it was televised, and JFK made a great speech about prior to that about why we should go to the moon. Now, when I think I actually saw the footage either as a senior in high school or a freshman in college. I don't remember, as a film student. And I remember seeing the actual footage, and I said to myself, "Oh, that's cute. Where's the real footage?" And the thing about that is like, I thought I was looking at some type of cheap reenactment. And it took me a while to process the fact that that was the actual footage. And the reason being because as a filmmaker, I studied special effects, I studied set design, I studied everything. So when I was looking at that moon footage with Neil Armstrong and stepping out on the moon and the rover on the moon and all that, in my mind, I couldn't process that that was the actual footage, because to me, it looked like a cheap set. It looked all fake. And I just was like, what am I looking at here? What is this? And I think most Hollywood directors, the top directors, are aware of the fact, or they're very keen on seeing cheap effects. They know it, but they're not going to speak up, of course, because they don't want to be labeled as conspiracy theorists and go against NASA and everything. So when looking at that footage, I started to really delve into this, because I didn't think, I was like, am I the only one that thinks that this is just some crappy footage that was shot on a soundstage and not really shot well? And I began to realize that there was this whole conspiracy theory arena of people who also felt the same way. And I started rewinding and watching the footage, and as the you know, the internet bubble, you know, burst or whatever, the internet came along, then there was a way to connect with other people. I saw more footage, and then I was convinced in my mind through the evidence that was presented that, you know, this was all a hoax. It was a staged event. Now, I'm not saying that we didn't land on the moon and we didn't go to the moon. I think we did, but I don't think that that footage that you're seeing is the actual footage of us on the moon. We may have gone there, but that footage is all staged. And the reason being, I want to go over some of the key points that I nailed down just for my own sake. And you might find more online, the great documentaries on this subject. So this is a wealth of information if you want to research it. But I advise you to look at things in our world with an open mind. Don't think about, oh, I don't want to be a conspiracy nut. Oh, you know, I don't believe that. Because when you shut down, you stop questioning things. That's the danger of going along with just what society feeds you, because you shut down your analytical process. You start questioning things. You don't use your brain. And questioning things doesn't mean you buy into everything. It just means that you want more information before you make a concrete decision on matters. Now, there are some films that, there's a film that you should see, actually with O.J. Simpson, is one of my favorite films from the past. It's called Capricorn 1, where they actually talk about the idea of having a manned mission to Mars, and then something goes wrong, and then they have to actually fake the Mars landing. And that's a really interesting film that kind of leads into this. So let's look at this whole idea of the landing on the moon. all right? So first of all, I don't believe we had the technology to do it back then, all right, the 60s. You know, computers were the size of warehouses. You know, we didn't have laptops or fast computers back in those days, but that's besides the point. The first thing I want to talk about is that when I looked at footage, there were multiple light sources. Now in filmmaking, we call these hotspots. This means that you're lighting a set, the light is reflecting and it's too hot to where you can see it. Now, that's a bad thing in any film that you'll see, but on this moon footage, what I'm seeing is multiple hotspots, which is telling me that it's not lit by the sun. They are stage lighting there. And you check out the footage, you'll see it. The other thing I want to talk about is the Van Allen belt. Now, this is a radiation belt around the Earth that if you were to pass through this, you would be fried, all right? And just to let you know that Jupiter has a gigantic belt, and there's no way we're going to be taking a manned mission to Jupiter because the radiation belt is so powerful. Some say it's even more powerful than the sun's radiation belt, that you would just become crispy fried chicken. But the idea here is, how did we get these astronauts past the Van Allen belt and to the moon? And of course, NASA says, well, we were going so fast that they, you know, the radiation didn't have time to affect them because that radiation only affects you if you have prolonged exposure. I'm like, yeah, right, okay, anyway. Just to let you know, NASA is working with third parties to put out these infomercials or these YouTube videos to try and explain what the conspiracy theorists have come up with, and similar to these points. So NASA is trying to counteract that. And what NASA tends to do is hit you with a lot of science and numbers and calculations to make it seem like they know what they're talking about. But one of the things that you have that will get you far in this world is common sense. And sometimes there's what I call the elusive obvious. You're looking at something and you know something's just not right because the subconscious mind sees something that's incongruent. And it's trying to tell you that what you're seeing is not in alignment with the way it should be, all right? So the other thing is, when you're looking at the footage of the men on the moon and they're walking around, it's very obvious that the footage is slowed down. If you increase it 2.5 times, you'll see that the motion is normal. It's like it looks better and looks normal at 2.5 times, and you can tell it's like they're walking on Earth, you know? And to simulate the low gravity, they had to slow the footage down. The other thing that I know from working in theater productions, working on film, are pulleys. You know, if you ever did a theater production of like Peter Pan or you know, any, you know, like Wicked or whatever, the way they get the actors up is they use a pulley system where they're pulling, you're behind stage and you're pulling these things, there are weights on them, and it pulls the actors up from wires that are behind them, right? And it's very, you know, you can tell they're being pulled by wires. So when I see the astronauts jumping up and coming down, of course, in the slow motion, to me, it's obvious they're pulleys. You can see them. That's not low gravity. That's a pulley system pulling them up and then letting them back down slowly. This is an old theater stage technique that we've been using maybe way even back to the time of Shakespeare, you know? So please, that's a joke. I mean, you would know if you look at the Vomit Comet. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's this plane that they use, and the plane goes up very high in the atmosphere. It takes a dive, right? And you can actually pay to get on this. And what happens when it takes that dive for, I think, maybe 2 minutes, only about 2 minutes, it simulates zero gravity, and people go there for the thrill of being in zero gravity. And you can see how people are in that type of low gravity and how the objects are floating, how their hair reacts, and how when they jump up, how they are like, it's like the weight is evenly distributed. It's not like a pulley is pulling them up. Anyway, don't want to go into that. Then there's the famous sea rock, which any prop guy knows this. You see, there's a photograph on the moon of a rock that has a C carved in it. Very clearly, it's a C. Now, prop guys always label props. They can label A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3. Obviously, the prop guy on the moon or in this sound stage didn't turn the rock over and left it turned the wrong way, so where you can see a C. And if you go Google moon footage sea rock, you'll see that. And then there's the crosshairs, and this is really bad. The crosshairs, you know, in photography, you have your crosshairs to line up your image. Well, in many of the shots, the crosshairs appear behind objects. So for example, you may have a rover and the crosshairs are behind the rover, which it shouldn't happen because the crosshairs are in the camera and should align over the rover. So that's an indication of superimposed shots. You know what I mean? Like they've actually tampered with the image itself. All right, so in Apollo 15, and this is really good to know because I've seen this a number of times, if you look at the background image, there's one image that they say is on one section of the moon, and then they move way across to another section of the moon, which is supposed to be a totally different location, yet it's the same background superimposed. So NASA is saying, no, that's a different location. He shot way away from the original location. So why is the so-called hills or mountains, whatever you want to call them, in the background the exact same? You're just reusing the background again. All right. And finally, there's one more important thing. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere. There's no clouds. So if you are on that moon, you should have a crystal clear view of the stars. Looking up there, you should see constellations. You should see some bright stars. But why, when we see the moon footage, there's nothing but darkness. It's black. And I'll tell you why, because they couldn't duplicate stars. They can't, if they were to put up a star pattern, any amateur astronomer could look at that star pattern and tell if it was legitimately taken from that perspective or that point on the moon. Because it's like star patterns are like CSI. If you can map them out, your position relative to the Earth based on the star pattern. So they can't create a star pattern of what it would look like on the moon because they weren't there at the time. So their solution to this is to just not show any stars because they know, you know, hey, if they create a fake star pattern, that astronomers, it would give it away really quickly, all right? And the last and most important thing that I want to talk about is the lack of a crater where the lunar module should be. So the lunar module just looks like it was sat there on the moon, and you have the picture of the astronaut standing in front of it, but there is no blast crater. There's no crater. That is an impossibility because if you're landing on the moon, and they used to have a video game called Moonlander where you hit the thrust and you try to land successfully down, you would have a crater. And this is time for show and tell. Let me just show you this. Let us, if I can hold this steady enough, let us just pretend like this right here is the moon. Can you see this? Yeah, I'm backing up to get some more light on that. And on there is moon dust, okay? So now, all right, let me try this, okay. You see that? The moon lander is coming down, and this is a can of air, right? So what happens when the moon lander comes down? Let me see if I can get this straight. That position is correctly. Anyway, let's see this work. The moon lander is coming down. We're landing, touchdown, landing. What just happened there? Moon dust everywhere. Everywhere. You see it? Moon dust everywhere. I got it over here, you know? All right, and it would create a crater, and the moon dust would be on the pods or the landing pods of the module. You would see all this dust on there. Everything is clean. Everything is clean. No crater, no dust anywhere, and it looks ridiculous for us to. I mean, for them to have made that mistake, which I think is a huge mistake. I think they were trying to give it away, you know, because. One of the things that the ruling elite does is they leave little bits and pieces of things that are incongruent, and that's their way of insulting us or laughing at us, I guess. But it's all there, and this is just the things I've just named are just some of the things that, you know, some of the things that are dead giveaways that we didn't land on the moon. And again, I'm not saying we haven't been to the moon, but I'm saying that that footage is not of the moon. That's a soundstage. And they have recently found footage of them rehearsing on a moon-like set, and where when they're doing a rehearsal, the stage lights come crashing down. And you can see this on YouTube. Go Google it. You'll see it. And it looks exactly like the moon. And this is a stage they were using as a run-through for the moon landing. Now, we have very powerful telescopes here on Earth. And one of those powerful telescopes is the Gran Telescopa in Canary Islands in Spain. And there are many other telescopes. what they are telling us is that if we point these telescopes to the moon, we will not be able to see the lander or the flag or anything of that nature. And I'm saying, well, how is that possible when we can point these telescopes into space and see the rings of Saturn, rings of Jupiter, you know, but yet we can't see a module, the lunar lander, on the moon? What about the Hubble telescope? Well, no, we won't be able to see that either. But I'm like, well, we are taking photographs of distant galaxies, and when we point the Hubble telescope to a dark patch in our in the universe, it comes and shows us that that dark patch really isn't dark. That there's other galaxies out there that are not visible to the naked eye. So I'm just mystified as to how come we cannot point any telescopes, powerful telescopes here to the moon or the Hubble and not see the image of the lunar module. How is that even possible? And or the lander and the flag and the other stuff that's supposedly there from the other missions. I'm just curious how come we can't see that, and how come we have not been able to? They you know, CIA is telling us they have satellites that can read your license plates. So I'm saying if we have that type of technology, why don't we have technology that can look into the moon and see all of this? So I'm not saying that they're wrong on those counts about the telescopes, but something doesn't seem right to me there. If you are looking at rings which are very thin and you can see them on Saturn, but you can't see what's on the surface of the moon, when we know that those objects reflect light like a star, and we should be able to see that. So, and then there was another case, and I think it was Chernobyl, or maybe not Chernobyl, but maybe it was something here where there was a radiation leak and they wanted to go in and fix it, and they asked NASA, well, could we get our men in there, because it's radiation everywhere, using the uniforms that the spacesuits that the astronauts used. And NASA said, oh, you can't use those because those don't repel radiation. And we were like, huh? If they don't repel radiation, how did you get through the Van Allen belt? All right, so, I mean, there's this, and then they had Neil Armstrong, before he passed away, they had given Neil Armstrong a challenge, and they said, would you put your hand on this Bible and swear that you did land on the moon? If you do that, we'll donate, I forgot what it was, $10,000 to charity. And he refused to put his hand on that Bible and say, we landed on the moon, even in spite of the fact that they said, if you do it, we'll give money to charity. He didn't do it. He wouldn't do it. Now, this is another interesting thing, and I'm going to close with this. When they had these, I think it was on Coast to Coast radio program, and they had the astronauts on there. And one of the questions that they repeatedly asked all the different astronauts on the mission was, what was it like being on the moon? Can you describe it to us? And you know, all of them couldn't describe it, and they couldn't remember what it was like being on the moon. And if that was the greatest moment of your life, are you telling me that you can't recall the feeling that you had, or what the weightlessness felt like, or just, and none of them could recall? And as a side note, Neil Armstrong became a recluse after that, didn't do interviews. They say, I don't know if it's true or not, allegedly started drinking a lot, didn't do interviews. So to me, this is all very suspicious. But you know, hey, listen, don't take my word for it. Do your own investigation. You know, keep an open mind. But as far as I'm concerned, from the perspective of a filmmaker and looking at the footage, I don't believe that footage is legitimate. It's it just looks like very cheap special effects from a low-budget film. And I do believe we've been to the moon. I do believe that, but I don't believe that footage is the real footage of us landing on the moon. So anyway, I'd love to hear your feedback. Please, if you like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and comment in the comment section, and let's get a discussion going on your thoughts. Until next broadcast, this is Kasat Keperu, and that's all for now. I'm in Ra.